Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're taking a look at Spark, Igniting the Flame of Wisdom. It's by Venerable Acharya Thoon Khippapanno.
Right, and it gives a unique perspective on the Buddha's path to enlightenment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to unpack some of the key insights and moments this book focuses on. It might give you a different angle than the stories you already know.
And the idea is to get a good handle on it, quickly but thoroughly.
We're using excerpts from the English translation of Spark. And it's interesting because the translator brings in comparisons with Laotian and Thai versions too.
Yeah, the author, Acharya Thoon, really aims to present what he sees as a, let's say, logical and maybe less commonly known version of the Buddha's history.
With a big emphasis on wisdom, right, on paññā.
Precisely, cultivating that insight wisdom.
So we'll follow the book's path,
Yeah.
starting with Prince Siddhartha's early life, the prophecies, his ordination.
That whole episode with the golden tray, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and then how his wisdom really emerged. Okay, let's dive in.
So the book kicks off pretty early, when the prince was just 5 days old. There's this prophecy.
Oh, right, the 8 Brahmin scholars.
Those are the ones. Most predicted he'd be either a great ruler or a Buddha, a dual path.
But one of them disagreed.
Well, the youngest, Katanya, he was certain, just one prediction, Buddhahood. He said the prince would definitely renounce the world.
Which, you can imagine, King Suddhodana wasn't exactly thrilled to hear. He wanted an heir.
Absolutely. So the king's strategy, as the book lays it out, was basically immersion therapy and pleasure.
Palaces for every season, loads of entertainment, women.
His marriage to Princess Yasodhara, the birth of their son, Rahula, just surrounding him with worldly success and comfort.
Trying to make the palace so appealing he'd never want to leave.
Exactly. And the book stresses how intense the security was. Massive gates, hundreds of guards.
Like a fortress.
Pretty much. It even mentions the king ordered that if the prince somehow slipped out, the guards on duty would be executed. The book calls it a VIP prison.
Wow. But eventually he did want to leave, or at least see the outside world.
Right. At age 29, he asks to visit Kapilavastu, a city he's literally never seen beyond the palace walls.
And the king must have been nervous.
Very. Still worried about that prophecy about him seeing suffering and wanting to renounce.
But he couldn't really refuse forever, could he?
No, his advisors basically said it was a reasonable request. The prince was an adult, had a family, so the king agreed, but with elaborate precautions.
Precautions is putting it mildly. The book describes this massive staging effort.
Decorations everywhere, flowers, flags.
But the craziest part is the tunnel, right? This separate viewing area for the old and sick.
Yeah, a brick tunnel, just little peepholes. The idea was to hide them, keep the unpleasantness away from the prince.
Which ironically led to tragedy itself.
Total chaos. People were desperate to see the prince and princess fighting for those peoples. The text says the weak and sick were literally trampled. Some died right there in the tunnel.
Just awful.
Yeah.
And the prince heard the commotion.
He heard cries, "I want to see too." He asked Channa, his charioteer, what was going on.
And when he found out it was the elderly and sick.
He insisted on going in, seeing that suffering firsthand, old age, sickness, death right there after being so sheltered. The book says it hit him hard. Deep empathy.
A real shock to the system.
A huge one. And right after that, the story goes, the king of the Devas arranged for him to see the fourth divine messenger.
The meditating ascetic.
Looking serene. And the book notes that apparently only the prince could see him.
So these 4 sights, the old man, the sick man, the corpse, the ascetic, all potentially encountered around this one event. That's quite a day.
Definitely changes a person. When he got back to the palace, he was different, withdrawn.
Contemplating what he'd seen.
Thinking about aging, sickness, death, and crucially, how to overcome them.
And that led him to the idea of becoming an ascetic.
Yes, he figured maybe solitude, a peaceful environment, the ascetic life could lead to understanding the cause of birth, the root of it all.
The spark was well and truly lit then.
You could say that. Which leads us to his departure.
Leaving the palace behind. He did it quietly, right? At night.
Very quietly. The book paints the picture. Saying a silent farewell to Princess Yasodhara and the sleeping Rahula, then summoning Channa and his horse, Kantaka.
And those massive gates. The ones needing 8 men.
They open miraculously. The text attributes it to his accumulated good karma, his parami, and the help of the devas. Even Kantaka's neigh, which should have woken everyone, was somehow silenced. Undetected. Of course, the next morning, chaos ensues in the palace when they find him gone. Princess Yasodhara is heartbroken.
But he's already on his way.
Reaches the Anoma River, cuts his hair, ordains as an ascetic, Siddhartha Bhikkhu.
And then he sought out teachers.
Right. He studied with two well-known ascetics, focusing on achieving deep tranquility through meditation.
And he was good at it, wasn't he? Reached high states.
Extremely good. The book mentions he attained psychic powers, the meditative absorptions, jhanas, deep states of calm.
Wasn't the answer he was looking for.
Exactly. He achieved incredible concentration, but the insight, the paññā, the wisdom to understand suffering's root cause, it just wasn't arising from that practice alone.
So he realized this wasn't the path to enlightenment.
Correct. He saw it didn't lead to ultimate purity or the end of suffering, so he left those teachers to find another way.
Which led him to the 5 beers.
And that period of extreme asceticism at Donkasiri Mountain.
The really harsh stuff. Starvation, self-mortification.
Pushing his body to the absolute limit, 49 days of fasting, almost dying.
Until the omen of the sitar.
Ah, yes, the 3 strings. Too loose, no sound. Too tight, it snaps. Just right, beautiful music.
The middle way appears.
Pretty much. He realized his extreme effort was like the too tight string. Counterproductive. So he gave up the severe austerities, started eating normally again.
Which didn't go down well with his companions.
Now, the 5 bhikkhus were disappointed, thought he'd given up, so they left him.
Leaving him completely alone.
Having tried indulgence, having tried extreme denial, and finding neither worked.
And this sets the stage for the Bodhi tree.
Exactly. By the Naranjar River, he accepts milk rice from Sujata.
And then floats the golden tray. This is a key moment in the book, isn't it?
Hugely significant. It wasn't just symbolic, it was a wager, a test.
The vow being.
If the tray floats upstream against the current, he'll attain Buddhahood in this life. If it goes downstream, well, not this time.
And?
It immediately went upstream, right against the flow.
Wow. That must have been an incredible moment for him.
A massive confidence boost. The book really pinpoints this as the true start of his unique path, the point where he began consciously applying wisdom.
Discovering sammā-diṭṭhi, right view, and sammā-sakkappa, right thought.
Yes, insight wisdom taking the lead.
And the tray itself became a teaching tool for him.
A parallel for his own mind. Just like the tray went against the river's flow, which represents worldly desires, attachments he resolved to train his mind to go against its natural current of craving and aversion.
Actively using discernment, mindfulness.
Right. To detach from wanting possessions, status, praise, even just pleasant feelings, seeing them as traps, keeping him in the cycle.
And it wasn't passive, was it? He really analyzed things.
Deeply. Looking inwards at his own experience, outwards at the world, seeing aging, sickness, death everywhere, understanding it applied to him too. Contemplating the body's impermanence, its unattractive aspects.
Using the tray analogy again for the cycle of rebirth.
Yeah, the tray floating downstream into the ocean represents that endless cycle samsara, driven by defilements, by tacha, desire.
Occasionally getting stuck on sandbanks.
Representing rebirth in different realms, good or bad, still within the cycle.
And through this, he identified the engine driving the whole cycle.
Desire. The book breaks it down into 3 types. Kamtakar.
Craving sensual pleasures, sights, sounds, tastes, possessions.
Right. Then pavatan, which is more subtle.
The craving to exist, to continue.
Yeah, attachment to being, wanting things to stay as they are, even if, as they are, involves suffering, resistance to change.
And the third.
The bhavatan. Craving non-existence.
Wanting bad things to just stop, to be annihilated.
Exactly. Aversion pushed to an extreme. But it's still a form of craving, an attachment to a desired outcome of non-being, especially regarding unpleasant states.
So all these forms of wanting keep the wheel spinning.
That's the core insight.
The text then talks about unavoidable suffering. Not just the big stuff like death, but something inherent.
Inherent in the aggregates, the components that make us us. Even when things seem good, the potential for suffering is always there, like background noise.
Aging, sickness, death are just part of the deal of being born.
Unavoidable consequences. And chasing pleasures only masks it temporarily. The book argues the only way out is to cut the root, extinguish the attachment to future lives, future existence.
And as he kept contemplating this, applying his insight,
Hinadasana arose. Direct knowing and seeing. Understanding the truth.
seeing suffering as suffering, impermanence as impermanence.
Cessation, really getting it.
And the book emphasizes this was his discovery, not taught.
Very much so. He realized the method came from his own wisdom. The truths, the Dhamma, were always there, like laws of nature, but needed wisdom to be seen.
It mentions a distinction. Dasananyat and Yatadasana.
Right. It's a subtle but important point. Vasananya is maybe like the initial glimpse, realization before full conceptual understanding. Desana is when the understanding clarifies the realization.
Like seeing something blurry, then putting on glasses.
Good analogy. The book suggests you need both working together for true insight. One informs the other.
He called this truth ancient.
Eternally existing. His practice wasn't just about being calm anymore. It was focused concentration to sharpen wisdom, to see this ancient truth.
The teamwork of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Sati, sammā-diṭṭhi, paññā.
Precisely. Leading to perfect knowledge, understanding the world so completely that he could say, secrets do not exist in the three realms. Nothing hidden.
Then the book touches on abhiññā, the supernormal powers.
Yeah, things like the divine eye, divine ear, reading minds, remembering past lives.
Are these seen as essential for enlightenment in this text?
Not really. They're described as arising from deep concentration, often linked to past cultivation, but they are considered worldly.
Meaning they don't get rid of the core problem.
Exactly. They don't eliminate defilements and can even inflate the ego. The Buddha apparently had them before enlightenment, but wasn't focused on them as the solution.
The real breakthrough was something else.
Asavakayana. The knowledge of the destruction of the asavas, the mental intoxicants, the deep-rooted defilements.
And the book places this when?
On the night of the full moon in June, under the Bodhi tree, this is the core of enlightenment itself.
The knowledge that the defilements would cease.
Yes, it's presented as this incredibly profound, courageous insight. The book suggests his vow not to move until enlightenment indicates this knowledge had already started to arise. He knew it was possible.
Thoon has a specific take on the traditional 3 watches of the night story, doesn't he?
He does. He suggests the first 2 watches, remembering past lives and seeing beings' rebirths, are more like those worldly abhiññā, not the direct cause of liberation.
For him, it's all about that 3rd watch insight.
Asavakayana. That's the key. The unique insight that ends suffering, achieved only by Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, and Arahant disciples.
Which brings us back to the starting point he emphasizes.
Sammā-diṭṭhi.
Right view, foundational. The book points to the Buddha's first sermon, the Wheel of Dhamma, showing that sammā-diṭṭhi and sammasakkappa, right thought, come first, under the heading of wisdom, paññā.
Like an elephant's footprint containing all others.
That's the analogy used. It encompasses everything else in the Eightfold Path. Right view guides right thought, which informs right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration.
So practices like the 4 foundations of mindfulness or focusing on the 4 noble truths
are also ultimately grounded in sammā-diṭṭhi, according to this perspective. There are ways to cultivate and realize that right view.
Why did the Buddha teach in different ways then? Because people are different characters, different levels of accumulated merit, parami. He adapted the teaching to the individual.
And the book pushes back against needing abhidhamma study to get enlightened.
Yes, it argues that while valuable, it's not a strict requirement for becoming an Arya Pugala, a noble one.
Okay, then there's the distinction between practitioner types, paññā vimutti, and citta vimutti.
Liberation through wisdom, paññā, versus liberation through concentration, citta. And crucially, the book says you need to practice according to your type.
Using the wrong approach won't work.
Pretty much. It suggests most people in the Buddha's time were paññā vimutti, inclined towards wisdom.
How do you know which type you are?
The book suggests an inclination during meditation. Wisdom types like to think, investigate. Concentration types naturally lean towards just becoming still and serene.
And it critiques modern practices that maybe focus too much on achieving states.
Some, yes. Practices focused on wanting jhana or powers, rather than using meditation, as in the Buddha's time, primarily to boost wisdom and become free from wanting.
So what about the citta vimutti types, the concentration-inclined ones? How should they practice?
They might start with tranquility meditation, which comes naturally to them, maybe from past lives as sages, but they might hit a plateau, a kind of dead end where serenity alone isn't liberating.
Then what?
Then the guidance is to pivot, to start using insight wisdom, paññā, to contemplate the 3 characteristics, impermanence, suffering, non-self effusions, maybe contemplate the repulsive aspects of the body, to cultivate dispassion, viraga, and break attachments leading to nibbana.
Interesting. So even the concentration types ultimately need wisdom.
That seems to be the message.
The book also touches on interpretations changing after the Buddha's time.
Yeah, the rise of different schools. It specifically mentions the common rearrangement of the Eightfold Path into sila, samadhi, paññā, ethics, concentration, wisdom,
But argues the original order started with paññā.
with sammā-diṭṭhi and sammā-sakkappa leading the way.
It keeps coming back to that. Samadhi as the core.
The universal starting point for all Buddhas, containing the core teachings common to all of them. Enlightenment is always via the Four Noble Truths and ending the mental intoxicants, grounded in right view.
It suggests confusion today comes from maybe not starting there.
Or misinterpreting the path, getting the sequence or emphasis wrong. It also mentions 3 conditions needed for enlightenment in this lifetime, but emphasizes discernment.
Like choosing a guide wisely. The oxen analogy.
Right. Don't just follow any lead ox, use your own discernment.
What about Abhidhamma's origin? The book mentions it.
Briefly, taught first to his mother in Tavatiya's heaven, then relayed to Sariputta, but implies it wasn't the primary method used by most disciples to attain liberation during the Buddha's life.
So, wrapping up, the main message is,
Use balanced reasoning. Understand their different accounts, but focus on the core principles. The golden tray analogy, again, training the mind to go against the current.
and the interplay of udasana, understanding before realization, and dasanaye, realization before understanding.
Both vital. It's not just intellectual knowledge. The book uses that stark analogy.
The photo of feces versus the real thing.
Exactly. One is just an idea. The other is direct, impactful experience. True realization hits differently.
So, the Buddha found the path himself through right view and wisdom. An ancient truth rediscovered.
That's the essence presented in Spark. And for deeper dives, the book itself is the source.
Well, that was a fascinating look into Venerable Acharya Thoon Khippapanno's Spark, igniting the flame of wisdom.
Definitely illuminating. A lot to think about there.
Absolutely. And I think if there's one major takeaway from this perspective, it's that foundational role of right view, sammā-diṭṭhi.
And the need for both genuine understanding and that experiential realization. They have to go hand in hand.
We really encourage you to explore the text further if this sparked your interest.
Definitely worth the read.
So our final thought for you today. If you really take on board this idea of sammā-diṭṭhi as the cornerstone, the absolute starting point for everything, how might that shift your own approach to seeking wisdom and insight? Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.